You are lying in bed at 11 in the morning. Your to-do list has 14 items on it. You wrote every single one yourself in your own handwriting because you actually want to do them. You want the business. You want the body. You want the degree, the savings account, the life you keep picturing right before you fall asleep. And yet here you are, staring at the ceiling, unable to make your body move toward any of it. This isn't a lack of ambition. This is something far stranger. Most people assume laziness and ambition can't live in the same body. One is supposed to cancel out the other. But if that were true, you wouldn't feel this specific kind of exhausted. Not the exhaustion of someone with nothing to do. The exhaustion of someone who wants everything and cannot start. Scientists have a name for this gap. They call it the intention-action gap. It's the space between deciding to do something and actually doing it. And for most of human history, that gap barely existed. Your ancestors didn't sit around debating whether to hunt today. Hunger decided for them. Cold decided for them. A predator in the grass decided for them. Action and survival were the same event. So where did the gap come from? Why does your brain draft a plan and then refuse to execute it? To answer that, you have to go back further than self-help books and productivity apps. You have to go back to the environment your brain was actually built for, which is nothing like the one you're living in now. For roughly 200,000 years, the human brain evolved inside conditions of scarcity. Food was inconsistent. Energy was precious. Every calorie you burned had to be justified by a real chance of survival or reproduction. A brain that spent energy carelessly was a brain that starved. So evolution didn't reward effort for its own sake. It rewarded efficient effort. It rewarded conserving energy until the payoff was certain. This is the part almost nobody tells you. Your instinct to avoid unnecessary movement isn't a personal flaw. It's an inherited survival strategy. Psychologists sometimes call it the law of least effort, and it shows up in animal behavior across the board, not just in humans. Given two paths to the same reward, a brain will almost always choose the one that costs less energy. Not because it's broken, because it's efficient. Now hold that thought, because here's where it gets strange. If your brain is built to conserve energy, why does it also generate ambition? Why does it hand you 14 items on a to-do list if it's simultaneously begging you not to move? The answer lives in a part of your brain called the mesolimbic dopamine system. This is the reward circuit, and it does something counterintuitive. It doesn't actually fire when you get the reward. It fires when you anticipate the reward. Neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz demonstrated this in a now famous set of experiments on reward prediction, showing that dopamine spikes before the outcome, not after it. Your brain lit up with dopamine the moment you imagined the version of you who finished the business, who has the body, who has the savings. That hit felt like progress. It wasn't. It was a preview trailer your brain mistook for the movie. This is why ambition can feel so real and so intense, while the actual doing of the thing feels like wading through wet sand. The dreaming part and the doing part are run by two different systems, and they were never designed to agree with each other. Here's the twist most people never hear. The laziness you feel isn't the opposite of ambition. It's the shadow ambition casts. The bigger and more emotionally loaded a goal is, the more your brain treats it as uncertain, effortful, and risky, which triggers exactly the energy conservation instinct evolution built into you. In other words, the size of your dream is directly proportional to the size of the resistance you feel picking it up. You're not lazy despite being ambitious. You're partially frozen because you're ambitious. Psychologist Piers Steele spent years studying this exact pattern in what's known as temporal motivation theory, sometimes summarized as the procrastination equation. Steele's research found that motivation to act on a task depends on how confident you feel you'll succeed, how much you actually value the outcome, and then gets divided by two brutal forces: how long you'll have to wait for the payoff, and how easily you get distracted in the meantime. A big, ambitious goal almost always has a distant payoff. That distance alone can crush your motivation to zero, no matter how much you want the result. Feel that for a second. Does it match what happens in your own head? There's a second piece of the puzzle, and it comes from a very different kind of study. In the 1990s, psychologist Roy Baumeister ran a series of experiments on what he called ego depletion, the idea that self-control functions somewhat like a muscle that tires with use. In one famous version of the study, participants were asked to resist eating fresh-baked cookies and eat radishes instead. Afterward, that same group gave up faster on an unsolvable puzzle than people who hadn't been forced to resist anything. Willpower, it turned out, wasn't infinite. It could be spent down over the course of a single day. Now imagine your actual day. You've already resisted snoozing your alarm. You've resisted checking your phone 40 separate times. You've resisted saying something sharp to a coworker. You've resisted ordering food you can't afford. By the time you sit down to work on your real ambition, your reserve of willpower is already running on fumes. It's not that you don't want the goal anymore. It's that the fuel required to act on it was quietly drained by 100 smaller decisions you didn't even notice making. This reframes the whole story, doesn't it? The lazy but ambitious person isn't undisciplined. They're often someone whose discipline gets spent elsewhere before it ever reaches the goal that matters most to them. There's a third layer, and it's the one that finally explains why some ambitious people freeze while others push through. Researcher Angela Duckworth spent years studying what separates people who reach long-term goals from people who abandon them, coining the term grit to describe passion combined with sustained perseverance. But here's the detail most summaries leave out. Duckworth's own data showed that grit wasn't primarily about raw willpower or motivation. It was about structure. Gritty people relied on habits and systems that removed the need for willpower in the first place. They didn't out-hustle the resistance. They built a life where the resistance rarely had to be fought at all. Which means the lazy but ambitious brain isn't missing motivation. It's often missing scaffolding. Ambition without structure produces a vivid picture of the future and nothing underneath it to actually stand on. And a picture with nothing underneath it collapses the moment your energy dips, which, remember, it was always designed to do. So picture your ancestor again, 10,000 years ago. They didn't need discipline to gather firewood before winter. The environment enforced the behavior for them. Cold nights punished laziness directly and immediately. You, on the other hand, live in an environment almost perfectly engineered to remove that enforcement. Consequences for your ambitious goals are usually months or years away. Rewards for distraction are seconds away. Your phone, your feed, your next dopamine hit, all instant. Your dream business, your dream body, all distant. Evolution gave you a brain exquisitely tuned to respond to immediate feedback. Then modern life surrounded that brain with 1,000 immediate rewards that have nothing to do with your actual goals. This is the real twist. You were never lazy in some moral sense. You are a Paleolithic energy conservation machine, dropped into a world engineered to exploit exactly that wiring for profit. Every app, every feed, every notification is competing directly against your 10-year plan, and it is winning most of the time because it was built by people who understand your dopamine system far better than you were ever taught to. Does that reframe feel uncomfortable? It should. It means the fight was never fair to begin with. There's a modern mirror to all of this that most people walk past every single day. Consider the gym membership bought in January with total sincerity. Consider the online course purchased at 11 at night, fueled by a dopamine spike about a future self who finally has it together. Consider the business idea sketched out in a notes app with real excitement, then never opened again. None of these were lies you told yourself. Each one was a genuine spike of anticipation, a real neurological event that simply wasn't backed by the structure needed to survive the ordinary friction of daily life. This is why shame is the wrong tool here, and also the most common one people reach for. Telling yourself you're weak or undisciplined adds a fresh layer of stress hormones, specifically cortisol, on top of an already depleted willpower system. Researcher Robert Sapolsky's work on stress physiology shows that chronic stress actively impairs the prefrontal cortex, the exact brain region responsible for planning, patience, and long-term decision-making. In other words, shaming yourself for procrastinating doesn't create more willpower. It chemically damages the part of your brain you need most to finally start. So what actually works if shame doesn't? The research consistently points somewhere unglamorous. Reduce the size of the very first action until it costs almost no energy at all. Not build the business, open the laptop, not get in shape, put on the shoes. This isn't a cute productivity trick. It's a direct response to everything laid out so far. If your brain is a scarcity-era energy conservation system, then the way to move it isn't to overpower it with more motivation. It's to lower the energetic cost of the first step below the threshold where resistance even activates. Shrink the action, and the ancient machinery stops treating it like a threat. This also explains why some days you finally sit down, and once you start, you don't want to stop. Once movement begins, that same dopamine system that punished you for anticipating the goal now rewards you for progress toward it. The hardest part was never the middle of the task. It was the first 90 seconds, the exact window where your 10,000-year-old brain was deciding whether this was worth the energy. Think about your own history for a moment. How many of your abandoned goals died in that first 90 seconds? And how many actually died somewhere in the middle? There's something almost tender in this discovery, if you sit with it long enough. The part of you that feels lazy was never trying to sabotage your ambition. It was trying to protect a body from unnecessary energy loss, using rules written for a world that no longer exists. It doesn't know the stakes have changed. It doesn't know that today, the real danger isn't wasted energy, it's wasted years. Nobody sent that update to the ancient parts of your brain, because evolution doesn't send updates. It just keeps running the last version that worked. So the next time you catch yourself frozen in front of a goal you genuinely want, notice what's actually happening underneath the surface. It isn't a character flaw surfacing. It's a 200,000-year-old energy conservation system doing exactly what it was built to do, colliding with a dream that system was never designed to understand. You are not broken. You are ancient hardware, straining under a species-wide software update nobody asked permission to install. And maybe that's the real answer. Stranger than anything you expected when you first looked at that 14-item list and wondered what was wrong with you. Nothing was wrong with you. You were just running the oldest program you have on the newest problem you've ever faced.